Insight report from Alex about some recent learning loss or recent areas of failed topics, and these three came up for last week. So let's roll. The first one says unions, intersections, and complements involving two sets. And this is our question. It says sets C and D are subsets of the universal set U. So universal set is F, K, Q, S, and Y. These five letters are the only letters in this set. C is the set K and Y. D is the set Q, S, and Y. When I'm given sets like this, it kind of might behoove me to know what's not in set C. Because currently we've got K and Y, so what's not in set C looks like F, Q, and S. What's not in set D? Well, K and F. All right, so find the following set. And if there are any that don't have any elements, we put the empty set or a 0 with a slash through it. And they want us to list them in roster form. This is the form that I listed C prime and D prime, or C complement and D complement in as well. All right, so let's look here. The first set they want to know about is C intersect D complement. So isn't it good that I went ahead and listed those? Maybe you should try to do that too before you do these types of problems. Anyway, what do C and D complement have in common? Well, let's take a look. C has K and Y. And D complement has K, F. So what do they have in common? Well, the only things that they share that are the same are these K's. So that's the answer. You don't put everything down, you just put what they have in common. So what they have in common is simply K. And that's all you put inside of the brace. The next one, C union D complement. Well, this is different. See, the N means what they have in common. So when you see the symbol right here, it means intersection, and it means what is in common, or what's common to both or three sets or four sets. What do they have that's the same? Now the union means, let's write down everything. So let's get this party started and write down everything we can see. Let me color it purple like the others. So C union D. First of all, we need to unite those together and find out what's not in there. So that means write everything down. So we've got K, Y, Q, S, and we don't have to write Y twice. We just write it one time. Because once we write it, that's the Y. Now what's not in here? It appears there's only one letter that's not in this group, and that's F. So we're looking for what's not in here. So C union D complement is what's not in there. What's not in C union D, and that's F. All right, next one. Let me go back. It says identifying true statements involving subsets and proper subsets. All right, so if this is a point of contention for you, listen up. Whenever you see this symbol here that looks like a strange looking C with a line under it, it means that something is a subset of something else. That means that if you have the letters X and Y, there are four subsets that you can write. And I'm going to write them over here in blue, a little light pen. So we have X, we have Y, we have X and Y, and we have a set that has absolutely nothing in it that represents the empty set. So there are four sets whenever you've got two elements. And I know that because the number of subsets is 2 raised to the 2 power. 2 raised to the number of elements. If there were 3, it would be 2 raised to the 3rd. If there are 4, 2 raised to the 4th. It's always 2 raised to the number of elements. Now the number of proper subsets, to be a proper subset means that I can take this X, it's a proper subset of XY. Y is a proper subset of XY. The empty set is a proper subset of XY, but XY is not a proper subset of itself. The set itself is never a proper subset of itself. That slash through there means it's not a proper subset. And the empty set means, well, it's empty. All right, so let's look at each of these statements. C, D, M, N is a subset of C, D, M, N. This is true. Sets are subsets of themselves. Sets are not proper subsets of themselves. So now this next one, 1, 3, is a proper subset of 1, 2, 3, 4 to infinity. If these elements are over here, then they are proper subsets. So it is true. All right. P, Q, R, S, T is not a subset of Q, S, U. This is true. However, the reverse might be, true if it wrote Q, S, U is a proper subset of P, Q, R, S, T, U. If they had a different order and a different symbol. But this is true so far. And then for my last one here, the empty set is not a subset of this set, and that is absolutely false. The empty set is a subset of every set. Let me type that out. The empty set is a subset of every set. Thank you for listening. Next one. Constructing a Venn diagram with two sets to solve a word problem. A college radio station surveyed 231 incoming freshmen to gather information about the genres of music that they liked. The table below gives the results for two of the genres. 75 like classical, 184 like jazz, 75 like both classical and jazz. Alright, so the 75 that like classical also like jazz. Isn't that amazing? So that means that here, in this little overlapping circle here, we're going to put a 75. And of course, I'm writing this, so this is not in, Alex. So I put a 75 here. This area represents those that like both classical and jazz music. This little part of the circle here, where it's just over to the side, are the people who just like classical. Now remember, 75, which is the same 75 right here, these are the same 75 people. They also like classical, so I don't put anything over here. So you shouldn't have two 75s, you just need to have one. Now the part that like jazz, well, 184 like jazz, but 75 of them have already been counted. So we're going to do 184 minus 75. Now had this little blurb here said just like jazz, then we could put the 184 right here. But it didn't say that. It says they like jazz, so they already been counted. So when we subtract right here, we're going to get a 9. This is going to become a 7. And that's going to be a 109 people. Hallelujah. So that represents 184 people total in this circle. Now, and that circle represents all the people that like jazz. If you add these two together, you get 184. And they're all in that little kind of teal circle. Now, there were 238 incoming freshmen that were interviewed, and 184 of them have been accounted for. So the rest don't like jazz or classical. They like a more modern form of music. So when we subtract these two, we end up with 54 students that actually don't like either classical or jazz. We're not really clear on what they like, but they don't like those two. All right, now the questions. How many freshmen like jazz but not classical? 109. So these groups just like jazz, but they don't like classical because they're not inside that classical circle, you see. How many freshmen like classical or jazz or both? Well, 184. Because there's 0 that just like classical, 75 that like both, and 109 that liked, that like jazz. And that's all there is to it. I hope that helps.